So, I recently had the chance to see Ari Aster's sophomore film, Midsommar. I've heard so many pronunciations of the film's title, it became a bit confusing. For the sake of this video, I'm going to continue pronouncing it as Midsommar. Don't hate me if that's wrong. I had been looking forward to this movie, especially considering how enthralled I was with last year's Hereditary, Aster's directorial debut. With only 2 feature films under his belt, Aster has quickly established himself as one of the most intriguing genre filmmakers working today. Now, as much as I liked the film and found myself living through it, that is not the reason I decided to talk about it today. A film like this is wrapped in mystery and secret meanings. Since its release, forums and blogs have documented the many Easter eggs Aster included, as well as debate what we as the audience were meant to take away from this whole experience. Falling down this rabbit hole, I became aware of the many political theories surrounding this film. It also is not helpful that Aster himself has hinted vaguely at a potential political message beneath the surface. First up is an analysis from Insider.
An even greater horror is done to Simon, the Londoner who mysteriously disappeared without his fiancée, Connie. Christian stumbles on Simon tied face down in the chicken coop, with his back sliced open and liver and ribs exposed. As we look closer, we see that his lungs are moving, indicating that Simon is still alive. If you're wondering how anyone could come up with this stuff, it turns out Aster did months of research on Viking torture techniques. What Simon's subjected to is right in line with the blood eagle method of execution by torture, a prolonged type of ritual killing detailed in Norse poetry. So why have such brutal Viking rituals survived in this insular community? And what does it all mean?
Allow me to pause right here and add a snarky comment or two. Was that supposed to be a serious question? Why have brutal Viking rituals survived in this insular community? Because it's an insular community. An insular community ruled by superstition and ritualistic sacrifice. This will all become more relevant in a moment. Continuing on with the video, whatever.
To get an idea, we should look to Reuben, the so-called oracle in the community. As an elder in the village explains, Reuben was purposely inbred to serve as a conduit for the word of the gods. The boy is said to have unclouded judgment as a result of his condition and his pure blood. Towards the end of the movie, he's shown sitting on a seat covered in cotton, looking almost like he's sitting on a cloud. In Aster's words, Reuben embodies the political message of the film, which is perhaps partly critiquing the global rise of xenophobia and the return of the far right in Sweden. As Aster said in an interview, if you consider Swedish history, it is a very closed society. And what does that really mean? There are things happening in Sweden right now that are echoes of things that happened in the Second World War.
An article from Forbes included a longer quote from Aster that provided a bit more context. Reuben in Midsommar is a very important character. He's important more as a symbol, as an idea, than he even is as a character. There are politics woven into the film, and Reuben is about as close as we get to that being articulated explicitly. What is happening? And then, if you also consider Swedish history, it is a very closed society. And what does that really mean? There are things happening in Sweden right now that are echoes of things that happened in the Second World War. So I'm sort of loath to expound openly about these things because I'm not making a polemic. But Reuben, he's like the full articulation of whatever the film is saying politically. From what I can gather, Aster's political implication here would fall along the lines of an increasingly nationalistic Sweden is inbreeding itself ideologically and also seeking guidance from that condition. That is my best guess. If that is supposed to be the message of the film, I don't believe it was conveyed very well. Nor do I see myself aligning with Aster's politics. The growing nationalist movement in Sweden is interested in leaving the European Union and pumping the brakes on mass Islamic immigration into their country. These are not monstrous goals by any stretch of the imagination. Also, this is not comparable to the Second World War. Godwin's Law is so played out at this point. More on that later. Now, I'm only assuming that's the political message of the film, given the clues that are available to me. To Ari Aster's credit, I would never call him a propagandist. In his own words, he didn't strive to make a political movie. However, if the cult in this film exists as a commentary on modern Swedish politics, I think that take falls apart rather quickly. The cult in this movie is open to having several outsiders observe and take part in their festivities. By the film's end, they're even open to have one outsider integrate into their family. The other outsiders are sacrificed, but keep in mind that is only for the final ritual, a ritual we are told occurs every 90 years. Presumably, in any other year, all visitors would return home safely. It's also worth noting that the final sacrifice of the film required 9 victims, 4 outsiders, 4 cultists, and the final sacrifice could be either or. That decision was left up to Dani when she's crowned May Queen. The outsiders, except one, were all selected for the sacrifice based on them showing disrespect toward the cult's beliefs. Christian is selected as the final sacrifice, and ironically, he's the only outsider besides Dani who never disrespects the rituals. Christian plays into another element of the film that throws doubt onto the cult's supposed xenophobia. He is instrumental in the ritual that provides new life when he is tricked into impregnating a young woman hand-selected by the cult. So this cult that accepts outsiders as May Queens and tasks outsiders with impregnating their young women is supposed to be analogous with groups that Astor compared to the Nazis? I'm calling bullshit. Astor is obviously a creative guy. I just wish that he let the antagonists of this film be what they are, rather than reaching to compare them to overdone bad guys. What makes the film especially disturbing is the element of human nature at its core. The cult don't believe they're evil. They're not stock villains we've seen in a million flicks. They operate by a different code and are willing to die, and in some cases kill, for their traditional belief system. The Guardian also offers their interpretation of the film. Let's take a look at that. What's it really about? Even if you're not into deciphering the puzzles, Midsommar is a powerful study of grief, betrayal, breakups, and more. And as usual, Florence Pugh is just brilliant as Dani. She's so adept at registering the emotions of her character, whether they're just below the surface or breaking out into wailing hysteria. We're with her every step of the way, and whatever else it represents, the ending of the film is satisfyingly cathartic for Dani on a personal level. As for her 3 male companions, they get what they deserve, don't they? They represent different facets of masculine inadequacy. It's clear that boyfriend Christian, Jack Rayner, is a coward and a selfish asshole from the outset, even if Dani is too fragile to realize it. Horndog Mark,
Oh, hi, Mark.
Will Poulter, thinks he's in Sweden's answer to Love Island, and Josh, William Jackson Harper, puts morality aside in favor of academic ambition. Do these male characters represent corrupting, toxic masculinity? Or is this a parable of snarky, city-smart, modern rationalism undone by primal, rural values? Or are the villagers' ancient pagan traditions actually far-right beliefs dressed up in folksy costumes? White nationalism, racial purity, eugenics, incest, something rotten at the heart of Western civilization? It's so bizarre to me to even pose the question, did these men deserve to die? Obviously not. At worst, they can be douchebags sometimes. Their deaths are meant to be horrific. We as the audience are not supposed to cheer on the cult. Even Christian's infidelity is done under the influence of psychedelics. He is sexually violated. He is the victim and gets put to death for that anyway. Jack Rayner, the actor who played Christian himself, noted how disturbed he was at the number of people who thought the death of his character was deserved. The Guardian also doubles down on the idea that the cult could possibly be an analogy for white nationalism. I've already explained why that analogy is deeply flawed. It seems to me many critics can't decide if they hate the cult because they're stand-ins for white supremacists, or if they sympathize with the cult because they killed off toxic males. Normally, these would be the types of people who see white supremacy and toxic masculinity in anything and everything. It doesn't help that Ari Aster dog-whistled to this crowd and didn't bother to clarify much beyond that. An interview conducted by Screen Rant of Aster and Rayner posited another racially charged theory involving Midsommar, a theory that Aster even seemed to agree with. I'm going to show that clip and explain why it can't possibly be the case.
Wow. Now, it also seems like there's an undercurrent, maybe of like racism or xenophobia in the story, in terms of like the way that Connie and Josh and Simon are treated is different from the way that Danny and Christian are, even if the end result is one. So, what was it that you wanted to say with that, or was that a conscious choice you made?
That was a very conscious choice, and I've tried to sort of weave a lot of things into the periphery of the film. And I think it's there, and so I'm reluctant to
Explain.
Yeah, to be too explicit about it, but it is there, and I'm glad you noticed that. And it's a very important part of the film.
What is this woman even talking about? Did she watch the same movie as me? She's implying that these characters were killed for being non-white. Simon and Connie were killed for disrespecting the rituals and attempting to leave. Josh was killed for taking photographs of the cult's holy book. How desperate are you to make racism the main focus of this film? These characters were not targeted for racial reasons, and it's conspiratorial to suggest otherwise. White outsiders are killed for disrespecting traditions as well. The interviewer doesn't even realize what she's saying. Of course, Simon, Connie, and Josh are treated differently than Christian and Danny. As I pointed out earlier, Christian and Danny don't show disrespect to any of the rituals. They actively participate. It is the height of dishonesty to see characters who happen to be of different ethnicities go through differing situations in a film and suggest they were treated differently for racial reasons while disregarding all context. Of course, ignoring that white characters suffered the same fate. It's race-baiting nonsense. I will happily recognize that Ari Aster's interpretation of this film will be the most accurate. He wrote the damn thing. However, the answer he gave here is vague and ultimately meaningless. His implied agreement doesn't line up with the movie I saw. And if it was his intention to make those three victims targets of racial hatred, then I don't think Aster as a filmmaker did a very good job of getting that across. To close this off, I wanted to propose what could have been a far more interesting political path this film had explored and at least does hint at. Midsommar has been described as an experience like no other. It is certainly unique and surreal. I wouldn't say it's entirely original. There are more overt inspirations, but the film I want to compare Midsommar to is Eli Roth's The Green Inferno. That was a movie with a clear as day political message, a message I don't feel reached its full potential. And while Ari Aster was not trying to make a political film, I feel his subtle approach hit this message a little closer to home. Here's a clip of Eli Roth discussing the inspiration behind his film, The Green Inferno.
So we're here with Eli Roth, director of Green Inferno, which I'm director-producer of Green Inferno, correct?
Yes, and co-writer.
And co-writer. Very excited to see this. I'm curious, with all the experience you have in this genre, why did this particular strange, forest world, remote, why did that speak to you?
I wanted to write a movie that was about modern activism, where I see a lot of people want to care and they want to help, but in general, I feel like people don't really want to inconvenience their own lives, and I saw a lot of people just reacting to things on social media. You see this social justice warriors, like, this is wrong, this is wrong, this is wrong. And they're just tweeting and retweeting. They're not actually doing anything. Or you see people that get involved in a cause that they don't really know a lot about, and they go crazy about it. So I wanted to make a movie about kids like that. I think there's a lot of great things, obviously, about activism. People commit their lives to it. But I wanted to make a story about kids that don't really know what they're getting into, get in way over their heads. It actually works, and then on the way home, the irony is their plane crashes, and the very people they saved think that they're invaders and just dart them and eat them and make them the food supply of the village.
So Green Inferno is your reaction to the SJWs of Twitter.
Yeah, my Green Inferno, I actually wrote it, and when I finished the draft, Coney 2012 happened. I was like, this is it. Like, everyone is going, what's wrong with you? They're drinking with their mugs, going like, don't you care about child soldiers and kids being raped? Like, how can you not tweet this video? Everyone got so self-righteous and tried, like, publicly shaming And it was something that they hadn't heard of 24 hours ago. So I think it's a double-edged sword. I think there are ways to get involved and ways to be helpful, but the SJW culture has gotten so out of control that you feel like everyone, are they doing it because they believe in it, or they just want to look like good people? Are people retweeting things because they think it's important, or because they want everybody to think that they're a caring person? So, and I'm not, making a judgment about these people either way. I'm just making a comment on it. So I wanted.
They do get eaten by cannibals.
They get eaten by cannibals. Yeah, exactly.
I like Eli Roth. I like the idea behind his movie. If it was meant to be a commentary on keyboard warriors, then I can't say I'm completely in love with the execution of his vision. The Green Inferno is characterized by a cloud of tragic irony. Student activists take a trip to protest logging companies that are destroying native tribes through deforestation, only to be eaten by the same tribes they wanted to protect. These characters are not social justice warriors. They're not retweeting pictures with flags. They are actively putting themselves out in the field. Anyway, bridging the gap, back to Midsommar, there's an interesting theme of cultural relativism throughout the film. During the first ritual killings of two elders who have outlived their usefulness, the outsiders react in their own ways. Simon freaks out, condemning the cult as obscene, and attempts to escape the village with Connie. They are both killed for this insolence. Simon, in particular, suffers one of the worst fates and is found late in the film being tortured in a manner similar to the Viking Blood Eagle ritual. Danny herself is distraught and tries to speak to Christian about what they just witnessed when they arrive back at their quarters. Christian is an anthropology graduate student and very recently decided to write his thesis on this small community. Those facts may play into his strange justification of the brutal ritual. While he attempts to rationalize it away, he wonders aloud what the community would think of homes for the elderly. After all, this is just what happens when you turn 72 years old in this village. You jump off a cliff to your death, and if the impact doesn't kill you, a mallet to the face sure will. As the film goes on, Christian and Danny are told Josh has gone missing, and he may have stolen the cult's holy book. Of course, this is a lie. At this point, the cult has killed Josh. But Christian bends over backwards so as not to show any disrespect to the cult. He disavows Josh right then and there. This is partially influenced by his less than friendly competition with Josh, who originally had the idea to write a paper on this community. But it is interesting how deeply apologetic he seems over the missing, in quotes, holy book. Christian goes along with the mating ritual, but is distraught afterward. He is only incapacitated after he discovers what's become of Simon. Thematically, this is important because Simon was the first outsider to protest the ritual killings and the most vocal. A potential reading of the film, although an unlikely one given Astor's implied political leanings, is a warning against cultural relativism. No matter how open-minded you are to outside cultures, they can still lead to your death, or in the case of Danny, a complete loss of identity and sanity. This is all just my reading of the film, in my opinion. No matter how you feel, let me know in the comment section down below. We can talk it out, maybe we can come to some kind of agreement if we happen to disagree, and I will see you in the next video.